Hello, welcome to our talk show and podcast. I'm Mitch. This is my co-host, Joe Martin.
Hello,
And
hello.
today we have our lovely guest, Christine. Hello, how are you?
Hi, how are you both? I'm doing good. Thank you
Good.
both for having me here.
You're very welcome. Yeah, doing well, thank you. So could you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you, what you do?
Sure, I'm Christine Balareso. So I recently transitioned. I was a political scientist, an academic. I'm still working as an academic consultant right now. So wrapping up a few projects into the month while also creating and transitioning as an intuitive spiritual coach. So I help people essentially rebalance their lives and establish their foundations after trauma and reconnect to their true soul being, kind of finding out who they really are. And this stemmed from my own personal experience, I guess encountering and experiencing different forms of trauma, and also separating from my own maternal family in the last several years, in conjunction with my own spiritual awakening, my own spiritual and healing journey as well. So I recently established a YouTube channel, which was totally out of my comfort zone. I am very much an introvert, extremely introverted, and being in front of a camera was completely different, but it's been an exhilarating type of experience. I feel like it's a new way to connect and to reach different people. I definitely like time to reflect, and you can't do that on camera. You have to really kind of speak pretty quickly. So it's helping me also attain that balance within and to just speak what kind of flows into my mind and not so much stay in my head. So at the moment, I am I have one foot in one door in the academic world, wrapping that up, and one foot in the new door. I have also two wiener dogs, two dachshunds behind me. So just in case you hear barks, that's them. So at the moment, that's what I'm doing.
So political science, what are you doing with that?
So I was a human rights scholar. Human trafficking was my area of expertise.
Oh,
I did my postdoc abroad at the University of Haifa, and I was interested in I would say that was my former life because I'm leaving that. I was interested in why trafficking or traffickers did what they did, how they did it, and essentially why this type of activity continued, not only domestically, but also across large geographic distances.
Wow.
And so it doesn't seem like it relates, right? When you think about political science, human rights, and then what I'm doing now, but I've always been very spiritually intertwined into different fields. I grew up, very much entrenched in the metaphysical world, in the occult world, because of my background. I am Peruvian. This was something that was very much talked about in my family, especially with my dad. And I thought, how can I bridge this world with political science? And they're very different. One is very much centered and founded or grounded in empirical science, the scientific framework, whereas a lot of spiritual themes, topics, the metaphysical world, it's not, although we're seeing, semblances of that in some other areas. So I found before when I was thinking about it, they weren't related, but ultimately, my vast experiences abroad and the diverse groups of people that I have worked with and the topics and themes that I have immersed myself in, not just in human trafficking, but also with vulnerable populations, civil conflicts, civil wars, terrorism. Those undergird supporting others too on their spiritual journey. So for me, I'm like, well, it wasn't time wasted because I thought, damn, I did 3 degrees, spent all these years doing all this research, conferences, writing, and no, all of these skills helped move me into this phase of my life. And so I thought it was exciting. Plus I like politics.
interesting.
Very fascinating. Yeah, it's amazing. I've never met anyone in that field. Could you please tell us more about what you discovered with human trafficking? Because from what I've seen, especially in the past couple of years, it's a big thing. Like it's not a joke. Like how many children go missing, for example, and all this other crazy stuff that goes on. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I didn't anticipate talking about trafficking, but of course, yeah, it's still a passion of mine because it disproportionately affects women and children around the world. You really have kind of 2 broad camps of trafficking: sexual oriented or exploitative type of trafficking, and non-sexual, which most people coin as labor trafficking, but again, it can happen. There's a lot of overlap. In other words, you can have someone that's being trafficked for labor, but also sexually exploited as well. And then you have diverse groups of people being affected depending on region as well, and the type of trafficking. So children, like you said, Mitchell, is one population that's affected as well in the United States. And I can speak broadly because I was a comparativist, so I focused on around the world, but also the US as well. And wow, there's just so much to say. In terms of trends, there's just a lot of things going on in this particular issue, in this dynamic. We have migration right now that's happening, and I'll use the United States as an example, with immigration in the South, especially those coming through the Mexican US border. And a lot of these children belong to migrant families, obviously, and they're traveling here for a variety of reasons, many of them economic opportunities, fleeing political situations, violence. Many of them do come from Central America, namely Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. And there is a huge concentration of political violence, political instability in the form of coups d'etats, drug violence, cartels, gangs, and the like. And also, there's a lot of different forms of inequality in those countries. So you have these people that are leaving their homes. It could be due to racial inequality, income inequality is huge, and gender inequality. There's a huge disparity between men and women in terms of not just balance, but parity, payment in terms of being paid equally in the workforce, but also in terms of how these genders see one another and the status of women in particular. So you have the notion too of different forms of women-oriented or gender-oriented violences or types of violence. And so children comprise just one of many populations that are affected by this. And so that's one particular reason why many are coming here. Of course, not everyone that migrates down this route is affected or trafficked, but they can be intercepted, just like a high likelihood of being intercepted by other criminals, like smugglers, which kind of work alongside traffickers, are not the same. And when you are traveling, you're obviously very vulnerable, right? Especially if you're traveling through countries that you don't know or are not very familiar with. And many times all they have on their back, that's it. That's what they can bring, what they can carry. And it's usually a small backpack. And then they have their kids, if any. And then they try to make it here. So that's just the US. You have other countries, you have migration from war-torn countries. We saw a few years ago, right, when the Arab Spring happened around 2011 onward. And even now we have a lot of political instability in the Middle East. And so you have seen migration coming into the EU through Greece and through different Schengen countries, because it's so easy to traverse across that region because of the lack of internal border controls. So there is a lot of movement. I don't know if you have anything specific about trafficking, because it's huge, it's really broad.
Well, I think what he was getting at is where the top of the funnel is probably. And that being the elites and government and that sort of thing.
Like their involvement in this.
Oh yeah, they're the ones who run it all.
There's a lot of there's a lot of different theories about who controls this, how this occurs, because when you look at the different types of criminal networks, and some of these are more sophisticated than others and some of them are not, right? And again, there's so many factors to consider too: the geography, the country, the location, the type of trafficking, the population, etc. You can't generalize. But for the most part, you have, I would say, like a horizontal type of structure where you do have those at the top. You can consider them like kingpins that do control different trafficking operations. And then you have almost different satellites, like orbits, where these groups, these satellites work in different parts of the world or in that particular country or region that trafficking occurs. If you're referring to some other well-known cases where people have been trafficked and there has been collusion by government officials, yes, we've seen that, like in sex tourism. which is a type of contemporary slavery. You see that a lot of customers that engage in this type of exploitation, because in sex tourism, many times you see children as they're the ones serving these individuals. They're coming from Western countries, and you have people mainly from Western developed countries. So there's that imbalance there in terms of who is exploiting whom and why. Government corruption does play a huge role. And I won't name any particular names or official names or entities like that, but I will say that government corruption is a huge role in facilitating human trafficking, both in origin countries and destination countries. And that's one of the reasons why trafficking has, in my own particular research, my expertise has grown immensely, because with corruption, you can look the other way easily.
Yeah. Interesting. So how did you turn that into your spiritual path?
Trafficking?
No, well, your expertise and all of that. And what are you, how did you transition, and where are you going now with it?
It's interesting you asked that, because it wasn't so much the research itself. It was, I had a job. It was a short stint in the nonprofit world. So I worked for a non-governmental organization that focused on human trafficking. I won't name it, but it was a very toxic experience. And I resigned from that job in November of 2020, no backup, nothing. And I'm just like, wow, this has never happened to me. But you know, when you get to the point in your life when you realize me or them, in terms of your mental health and emotional state, you pretty much quickly choose yourself. At least I did. And at that moment, I knew there's no way I can stay in here. My values, my internal compass, it did not align to this particular organization. I was experiencing verbal and emotional abuse, and it was time for me to leave. And that sparked my healing journey. Again, my second wave of a deeper healing. And that's when I decided, you know, I've been wanting to leave this particular career for so long, but I stood in it, I stayed in it, and I continued in it because I kept thinking, well, I spent so much time, I invested so many years in this, I don't want to waste it. And I also had a lot of fear of what would my colleagues think, what would family think, what would society think. And you know, going from an academic to going to like all the way on the other side as a spiritual entrepreneur, as an intuitive coach. I'm a psychic empath as well. I have a diverse interests in the metaphysical world. So I kept, you know, it was really fierce. That's the bottom line. And so as much as I wish I could say it was the human trafficking that, you know, the substantial research that helped me pivot into this next stage, it wasn't. It was realizing that I needed to put boundaries in my life and really heal. And so it was a toxic job that really was the last leg of my own journey that kind of kicked me out. And I think it was the universe's way of saying it's now or never. It's, yeah, pretty much. Because when we don't make the decision ourselves, I feel like, you know, external things or circumstances happen, and you can either go with it and flow with it or resist. And, you know, obviously with that saying, you know, what you resist persists. And I'm like, I don't want this anymore. That's really why I kind of went, I would say, full circle, came back to my passion, because this is where I started when I was younger.
Interesting. And when did your spiritual journey start?
So I was thinking about that recently. I think unofficially it started in 2013 during my PhD studies. I was very discontent. You know, when you feel an internal disequilibrium within yourself, you don't feel like you're truly on the right path, like your soul doesn't feel aligned. That's how I felt when I was doing my doctorate work and my research. I was passionate about it. I loved it, but I knew it wasn't my path, but I stayed. And it was because I was comfortable in it. I'm like, okay, just keep going. You will get there. If you want to pursue a tenure track career, you can. If you want to do research, whatever, you can. And I stayed with it. And that lasted until I returned from the US. I I did my postdoc abroad at the University of Haifa in Israel. And when I came back, it was like everything just went to shit, for lack of a better term. I was so disenchanted, so disillusioned with the academic circle, with what I was doing, with life in general. And I went into a very deep depression. It was major depression. And that lasted for several years. And for me, I coined that as my dark night of the soul. It was rough. I just felt so disconnected. Everything fell apart. I had no interest in continuing my research. It pretty much, almost like a snap, it really turned around for me. And it wasn't really until, I would say, like 2019, 20. Actually, no, I can pinpoint it. I don't know why I'm guessing. My grandfather died in 2019 in February, and he was the closest human, or the human that I was the closest to. Before, it was just animals. I have a strong connection to animals, and I communicate with them as well. My grandfather died, and it was like a veil lifted. And I don't know if many others have experienced something similar, but before, it was like an unsettling feeling, get off I kept telling myself, get off your path, this isn't for you. But I was just so scared, and I stayed in my bubble. And then when my grandfather died, it was literally like a veil lifted. And the day he died, I knew, I wasn't with him, but I knew when he died, and I've communicated with my grandfather ever since, every day. And it was literally like I woke up. Seriously, that's the best way I can explain it. Just things didn't make sense, but started making sense for me. And I just started seeing the way my own family was, my maternal family. And I didn't really like it. And a lot of just experiences from my childhood came up, and just things were bubbling. And that was the start of, I would say, the official spiritual awakening, because I actually took that action. And I started taking steps to kind of meet myself, my own inner self, halfway, and realize, wow, why do I feel just different? I just feel like I was reborn, but in a different family. It's so hard to explain. So just moving forward, yeah, I helped, my grandfather died, and I helped my grandmother move, but there's a lot of things like in my family. How do I best explain it? I just feel like the structure is kind of narcissistic. And there were just a lot of dynamics I didn't like, and that I just kind of came to a full realization within myself. And yeah, I had a split. I basically, it was over something small with my grandmother, a small comment about choosing chicken to, what she wanted to make for dinner, and she needed help. She was in her late 80s at that time, maybe 90, and she needed chicken. And I realized she had gaslighted me. She would always do that as I was growing up to my mother. And so, in just a very, very brief overview, because that's like a whole nother story, but in my family, very enmeshed, people are very enmeshed, very codependent, people pleasing. There really are no boundaries there. And so I was like that, very much like that at that point in my life. And whatever my grandmother told my mother believed. And so I'm just like, why do I feel like I'm losing it here? I know what I said and I know what I saw, but I'm hearing something different. So long story short, I made the decision to estrange myself from my maternal family. And that includes my mother, my grandmother, and my twin sister. And that was really, really hard. It took a toll. It was, when people say, oh, spiritual awakening is kind of flowers and realizing, this is amazing and you're coming to truth. It wasn't for me. It was like someone just hit me in the head, and I'm like, shit, I'm like, this is hard. A lot of just really hard truths that I needed to confront. And it's been almost 2 years since I've been estranged from them. But I know I couldn't have done my own healing if I were still with them or in that orbit, because it's just difficult when others don't acknowledge or even see what's going on to meet them in that way. And so I realized I'll have to meet them where they are. And we just couldn't be in that same space. And it took me a while to really forgive my mom. But after I did that, it was a release. When people talk about surrendering trust and faith and just letting go, I didn't know that concept until I did that with my mom. And it made it easier because for a long time I tried to change people. And this was all the start of my own spiritual journey. And that really led me to do a lot of work in estrangement, which ironically, there is no national organization in the United States that focuses on estrangement, and forget support groups. I was Googling, I'm like, okay, maybe there's a meetup on an estrangement group or something. Nothing. And, you know, they have specialized therapists, but none that I could connect to. So I actually connected to Standalone, a UK-based organization that helps people that have experienced estrangement. Because when you think about it, estrangement is like a living type of grief. You're grieving for people that are alive. And so it's, yeah, it's kind of dumbfounding. It dumbfounded me when I thought about it. I was like, what's the past tense of that? It really perplexed me because this is something that's not really discussed. It's very much taboo, I would say, more so than mental illness in the United States, and especially around the world, and especially in my culture, being a Latina and a Peruvian. And that was the spark of my own journey. So I did a lot of shadow work. I dove into inner child work. I did an extensive amount of work on the mother wound, on estrangement issues. And I have come full circle. And then with that toxic job, it was just another layer because, you know, until we heal those wounds, they manifest in so many different ways in other people and other situations and other experiences. And that's what happened. My former boss was like my mom. Like, damn, I mean, there was a good aspect to her, but in the way too, she was wounded as well. And it took me a while to realize that. So I'm grateful for those experiences because I wouldn't have been able to heal had I not been aware of those. So that also propelled me.
That's great. So are you taking on clients now, or what are you doing? What do you have a website and stuff set up?
Nope. I'm not starting probably until the end of Libra season, probably late October going into November.
Okay.
Right now I'm wrapping up a few projects from my academic life, some things that I need to just wrap up and finish and close that door before I welcome the new. But I did work with one client. It was like a practice client, which was amazing, and I loved it.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'm developing those at the moment.
Well, one thing I thought of, and I wanted to ask you when you said it, you said you communicate with animals. How does that go?
You know, this was something that I never thought I had the ability or gift, and I think everyone does. Like, I never say, oh, I do this or that. I think everyone has the ability to develop many different gifts that they think they may not. Some of them are latent, they're hidden, and some people just reject them. But for me, I just never knew. I just always thought the words and images I got in my head, I'm like, oh, that's just my imagination. No, apparently that was communicating with animals. And my grandfather's line, we come from a long line of mystics and shamans, and apparently it's something that is prevalent in that line, and I had no idea. And maybe that's why I've always been close to them. Just when I'm around an animal, and this is no offense to any human if anyone watches this, but whenever I see anyone walking their dog, I go straight for the dog and not the human.
Oh, I'm the same way.
And I just connect. It's like we talk to another. The dog, I can just feel their energy. They're so excited and happy. You can see it in their eyes and the way they wag their tail, the way they stick out their tongue. I just start getting, I just know. So it's like a form of claircognizance, but also just, I get images in my head too. And I just, yeah, I just know. And then the picture comes to me quickly in the message. So
cool.
those are, yeah, Mitchell, sorry.
Well, I was just saying it's very cool. Yeah, I love animals too. So you got your dogs there with you, right?
Yes.
Do they have any messages for us? Is there anything your dogs are sharing with us?
No. My dogs are a little bit anxious. Whenever I do any meetings or they hear others they don't recognize and any other voices or even their energies, they get a little bit anxious. They're quiet on the couch behind me.
Oh,
So what is it, like a message that you would get from, or what kind of image would you see when you get a communication from a dog or another animal?
It's funny because I can communicate with the dogs, but I mainly communicate with birds, cardinals, hummingbirds, crows, ravens. I think those are what I would call my spirit animals. Maybe because I'm an air sign too. I don't know, but
yeah, that's interesting. So you're into astrology because you mentioned Libra season and then you mentioned air signs. I was thinking, I was like, can I just ask you what your astrology sign is?
yeah, I'm a Libra and rising Libra and
Cool.
Virgo moon.
Oh wow! And this the spirit animal of the Libra is the crow as well. And then there's Mercury, which is more communication. It's very cool.
Exactly. I have 6 or 7 placements in Libra, so I definitely identify with flying creatures, but images that I get with them, it depends. It just varies depending on the message. But with hummingbirds, I have a feeder. And last year, I just took an impromptu trip to Sedona. I just felt a calling. I'm a planner, like I plan things to the T, down to like the gate number when I fly. For this particular trip to Sedona, I didn't plan anything. I just felt such a strong call, such a strong pulling. I'm like, I have to go there. I had no interest before in going to Sedona. I didn't even know Sedona existed, but somehow it came upon my radar and I flew there, or excuse me, I drove there. No plans. I had booked my Airbnb the day before and just drove. Didn't even have an itinerary, nothing. And I remember when I was hiking through a forest, I came in contact with what I thought was a giant bumblebee. It was a hummingbird. I was flapping around going, thought I was losing it. And the little animal landed on a branch near me. And the first thing I heard was love. Not the love people think of, like romance, but it was love, like self-love. And I knew that was the start of a radical self-love journey. So for me, I associate the hummingbird with self-love, with joy, and also with balance. Because when they fly, they flap their wings and it goes in a figure 8.
Yeah.
Figure 8 upon, has various meanings, eternity, infinity, but also balance. And I'm like, wow, this makes sense. I'm a Libra. Like, this is my animal. So for me, it spoke to me too about always introducing balance and also doing that within myself as a form of self-love.
Interesting.
Yeah, we actually had a guest on the other day, Aurora, and she pulled the hummingbird card. She did, right? Hummingbird?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
And I also want to apologize for my background. It was randomly flickering and it was making me laugh. So I got rid of that. Hopefully it doesn't happen next time.
Oh, that's okay. You said
So-
the light was flickering?
Well, I have this Zoom filter called Aurora, and it was just randomly flickering like thunder or something. So what's your moon sign? Your birthday's coming up soon too, yeah?
Yes, October 14. My moon sign is Virgo. How about you all?
Cool. I'm Leo Sun, Pisces ascendant, Taurus moon.
Okay. We got Venus in common.
I got
I know.
Jupiter in Libra though.
You
I'm
what?
a Virgo and I don't know the other ones.
Is you are Cancer ascendant. And your moon sign, what's your moon sign? Gemini.
Uh,
Gemini moon,
yeah,
yeah.
thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Their
Yeah.
sign, yeah.
What's
What's your Jupiter?
what?
Sorry, what's your Jupiter sign?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
Mine's in Scorpio.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, I have mainly fire and air in my chart. It's super. I love astrology too, and that's something that I also incorporate because I'm interested in my own coaching to incorporate different modalities. I do candle work, crystals. I use crystals and I follow the lunar cycles strongly,
Cool.
and just nature in general. I do a lot of ancestral work. It's just something cultural that is really important, but it really helps to, I think, connect to yourself to and understand yourself and find that inner balance. Just like the seasons, when people say eat what's in season, right? Or, fruits and vegetables. I feel like astrology is very much mirrored to us in that same way. Each season, there's something that we can learn more about ourselves, not just about that sign, because that's just the sun sign, right? It's just one aspect of who we are. There's so much more in our natal charts. It's exciting when you dig in. Just so many things to learn about yourself.
It's interesting.
You guys know your North Node?
Mine's Sagittarius.
Okay.
No, I don't know.
Oh, okay. I'm a Cancer.
Oh, cool. So North Node in Cancer, would that mean that you're moving towards kind of poetical, whereas your journey is kind of moving towards more mystical stuff, right? It's the water element. Do you think that ties in with what you're doing in any way? Or can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. That's always been the start of my journey. Um, Mysticism. My Chiron is in Taurus, and it kind of feeds into that, things I needed to heal. And right now we're in, a Chiron retrograde until December. So it's kind of perfect timing to delve into that. And it does tie into my North Node in Cancer, which is our destiny, what we step into.
Cool.
So hard. I've been logical most of my life as an air sign. And, water signs, Cancers are very intuitive, very into their feelings, into their emotions. Many Cancer friends that I have are very vulnerable with me one-on-one, very nurturing. It's all about the home. So that's what I'm stepping into. And I'm like, what? I'm like, the home. I'm like, I want to be out there. I don't care about the home. And I had to take a step back and think about it. And I'm like, this is fitting for what I do because it enhanced my empathy, my empathetic skills. And as an empath and as a highly sensitive person, also as an introvert, it really made me connect to that space even more. So I started to see it as I got older. This does make sense. This is where I am supposed to get into because it was very uncomfortable for me. I was never a vulnerable person emotionally. I was good at having a very calm, logical face, not showing my feelings. And nurturing, that was different. It was hard to do. But now I have plants. I've gone crazy with plants. I nurture and talk to the plants, which is something I didn't do years ago. And my intuition, my psychic abilities have definitely become more enhanced as I've gotten more in tune with myself and found that inner balance between who I am, both masculine and feminine energies. And so I feel like when you do step into your North Node, which is can be very uncomfortable because it's something that you're meant to learn in this lifetime, and that's what you're meant to cultivate, but also balance too with your South Node. It really just kind of brings things full circle for me. And this taps so much into what I'm doing as an intuitive spiritual coach and helping people.
Cool. Yeah, because the Cancer sign is very witchy, isn't it? It's very mystical. And
It's funny you say that. I've connected to so many witches. I went to a hairstylist or a hairdresser one day to get my hair cut because I have curly hair. So it was a specialized curly hair stylist. And the first thing I said to her was like, "You're a witch." Like, oh crap, I could have said that. What'd you say, Mitchell?
Well, I said that was a nice greeting. Just
and maybe in like an academic setting, I would have been like, "What did you just say?" But I just felt so compelled. And she's like, "Yes, I am a witch." She's like, "Are you?" And I said, "No, but I know a lot of witches now. A lot of witches are coming into my orbit, and I'm attracting a lot of other people, just people, whatever they call themselves." It's really a label because many are just they can overlap, right? Whether it's light worker, starseed, galactic, I don't know what they call them, galactic channelers, persons, so many people. And yeah, it's definitely witchy, but I relate to a lot of that because there's different types of witches. Many of them use herbs. They follow the lunar cycle, very much in tune with nature. And that's something that's very close to me and that connects to me on a soul level. And I would love to do that one day, to integrate forest bathing, integrate different forms of walking meditations in the forest and really connect to spirit and to animals and to just plants and trees in that way, because it was a huge element in my own healing journey. I would say number one was I got my butt into nature and I hike almost an hour and a half every single day. That was like the number one prescription for me to heal.
That's great.
Oh, and Joe is true node in Taurus, by the way. So you're North Node Taurus.
You have a moon in Taurus. That's funny. We have a little bit in common, you guys. I feel like we're linked.
That's funny.
We all have Venus in us. I mean, as a ring. You guys are gonna feel Libra too.
Yeah, I get on very well Libra. Two of my sisters are Libras as well. And my partner is Libra moon with Cancer sun and rising. So it's pretty much ties with all of this. Oh, by the way, so Zoom says we've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay.
So I want to say thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed listening to your diverse wisdom and conversation and everything that you're sharing. going from trafficking to this is really cool, very inspirational. Yeah, thank you for coming on. Do you have any last messages you'd like to share with anyone?
Thank you both so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any last messages? I would just say to keep going. I've been getting a lot of channeled messages. This is not going to make any sense. I'll say it fast because I know I see the clock there. I've been getting airplanes everywhere, and Spirit must hate me because I'm like, can you confirm that again? Just one more. Right now, we're going through so many changes, as many of you guys are aware, and I'm just getting just stay the path, no matter how much discomfort you feel internally, because a lot of people are feeling almost like segregation, like a breaking apart within.
Yeah.
But it was such a pleasure meeting you both. I really enjoyed this
You as
time.
well.
Yeah,
Thank you so
you as well.
much.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And also, because you said you haven't got your website done until Libra season, if you want to just get back to me with that information, then we can add it to the description later.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely will.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. And we'll say bye for now.
Bye. Talk to you
Bye,
guys.
everyone. Bye.